The coach clattered to a halt in front of the Etherberg station, kicking up dust that shimmered gold in the fading December sunlight of 1874. Gunslinger Jedediah Smith stood firmly on the wooden platform, his worn hat pulled low to shield his eyes from the glare as he scanned the incoming coach. His hand nervously checked his pocket watch for the fourth time, then brushed at his recently trimmed beard. After 6 years of isolated ranching in the mountains, today I was about to meet the woman who had agreed to be my wife. The driver jumped down, stretching his back before moving to open the door. "Tough trip from Laramie," he muttered to Jedediah. "Your mail-order bride's on board." She didn't say a word the whole way. Jedediah nodded, his throat suddenly feeling parched. The letters from Miss Clara Harper had been brief but promising, a young schoolteacher seeking a fresh start west of here. Her correspondence had been well-written and thoughtful, indicating a sensible woman who understood what marriage to a rancher might involve. The coach door swung open. A small gloved hand appeared, followed by the hem of a dusty blue travel dress. The woman who stepped out stood frozen for a moment, her face partially hidden beneath a simple bonnet. When she finally looked up, my practiced greeting caught in my throat. Her face was streaked with tears, her blue eyes red, rimmed and swollen. She clutched a small pendant to her chest as if it were a shield, her shoulders trembling visibly even beneath her heavy traveling cloak. Miss Harper. I stepped forward and removed my hat. She nodded once, her lips pressed tightly together, as if trying to hold back her emotions. "I am Jedediah Smith," I said, offering my hand, which she took with obvious reluctance. "Welcome to Bainbridge." Tears spilled down her cheeks again. She swiftly wiped them away with a handkerchief already damp from previous use. "I apologize, sir," she whispered, her voice trembling. "This is not how I envisioned our first meeting." Around me, the station buzzed with activity as passengers disembarked and luggage was unloaded. A few curious onlookers had paused to observe the awkward scene unfold. Jedediah gently guided her away from prying eyes toward the small bench at the end of the platform. Once seated, he reached into his pocket and offered her a clean handkerchief. "You don't need to pretend with me," he said softly. "Whatever's troubling you, Miss Harper, I reckon you've had a long journey to think on it. No need to force a smile for my sake." Her eyes widened slightly, and she accepted the handkerchief with a trembling hand. "You're very kind, sir. I fear I may have made a terrible mistake." Jedediah felt his stomach tighten. He'd heard stories of mail-order brides fleeing at the sight of their intended husbands. He wasn't vain, but he knew his appearance was decent enough, tall and broad-shouldered at 31, with a face weathered by sun and wind that his mother had always called handsome. "Is it me?" I asked directly. "If I am not what you expected, no." She interrupted quickly, genuinely surprised. "No, sir. It's not you." She looked around nervously. "Might we speak somewhere more private?" Jedediah nodded, fetching her trunk from the stagecoach and carrying it to his wagon. He helped her climb onto the wooden seat, then settled beside her, giving the reins a gentle snap to set the horses in motion. "My place is about 4 miles outside town," I explained. "We can speak freely there, or I can take you to the hotel if that's better." Clara clutched her bag tighter. "Your place would be best, I think." We rode in silence through the small town of Bainbridge. It wasn't much. A general store, blacksmith, saloon, small church, and a few other buildings lining the dusty main street. I noticed Clara taking everything in with cautious eyes. Once they'd left the town behind, following the winding road through golden prairie grass, I finally spoke. "I lied to you, sir. Jedediah kept his eyes on the road, his expression neutral, despite a sinking feeling in his gut. "About what exactly?" she pressed on, her voice steadying somewhat. "In my letters," she continued, her tone calmer, "I am not. I hadn't been entirely honest about my situation." The wagon hit a rut, jolting us both. Jedediah steadied her with a hand on her arm, then quickly pulled it back. "I'm listening," he said. Clara took a deep breath. "I told you I was a school teacher in Kennebec. That's true, but I didn't leave that job voluntarily." "It's lovely," she said softly, her eyes admiring the large stone fireplace, the shelves lined with books, and the windows that poured in the late afternoon sunlight. "Did you build it yourself?" "Most of it," Carrick acknowledged. He had assistance with the framework and chimney. He gestured toward the staircase. "Your room is upstairs, the first door on the right. I've prepared it for you, but if you'd like anything changed, just tell me." She looked at him questioningly. "We're not married yet, Miss Harper," he clarified. "The preacher visits town every other Sunday. He'll be here this weekend if he hasn't left the sentence unfinished." And her face showed a clear relief. "Thank you, Mr. Montgomery." "That's very thoughtful." Carrick carried her trunk upstairs, placing it in the bedroom he had spent weeks preparing. He bought a new quilt from the general store and hung fresh curtains sewn with the help of his neighbor, Mrs. Harper. I arranged a small vase of wildflowers on the dresser. When I came back downstairs, I saw Amelia standing by the window, gazing out at the ranch. Rusty had settled at her feet, as if he had known her forever. "I need to tend to the evening chores," I said. "The kitchen's stocked, but don't feel like you have to cook tonight if you're too tired. There's stew left from yesterday." I turned away from the window. "I'll prepare supper, Mr. Montgomery. It's the least I can do after your understanding." Carrick nodded and headed for the door, then stopped. "Miss Harper." "Yeah." I dressed quickly in a rugged brown work gown, pinned back my hair, and hurried down the stairs, expecting Carrick to be impatiently waiting. Instead, the house was vacant, except for Rusty, who wagged his tail in greeting. On the kitchen table, I discovered a note penned in surprisingly elegant handwriting. Miss Harper had gone to check the north pasture, returning by mid-morning. Coffee was on the stove, bread and preserves for breakfast. Rest well. Relieved that I hadn't offended anyone with my delay on my first morning, I poured myself some coffee and stepped onto the front porch. The daylight revealed a breathtaking view. Rolling grasslands stretching toward distant mountains, cattle peacefully grazing in the nearest pasture. The ranch buildings appeared larger than I had realized in yesterday's fading light. Beyond the barn, I could see a chicken coop, a smokehouse, and what looked like the beginnings of a new structure. After finishing my coffee, I decided to be helpful. I went back inside and took stock of the kitchen, making a list of supplies we might need from town. Then I rolled up my sleeves and began thoroughly cleaning the already tidy house. By mid-morning, I had swept every floor, dusted all surfaces, and was kneading dough for fresh bread when I heard a horse approaching. Through the window, I watched Charles dismount with a fluid, graceful motion that spoke of years in the saddle. He took off his hat and wiped his brow before leading the horse into the barn. I quickly checked my appearance in the small mirror near the door, smoothing stray strands of hair and brushing flour from my cheek. I wasn't entirely sure why I cared about my appearance after a morning of housework. When Marcus entered, the aroma of fresh baking filled the house. His eyes widened slightly at the transformation. Gleaming surfaces, organized shelves, dough rising by the stove. "You've been busy," he said, hanging his hat on its peg. "I hope you don't mind," I replied. "I want it to be useful," he said gently. even though it looks better than it has in a long time." He trailed off, then finished softly. "Since my mother visited 3 years ago." Something in his voice made me pause. "Are your parents still in the East?" Carrick shook his head. "They passed on. My father shortly after the war. My mother in '70, he replied. "I'm sorry," I said sincerely. He nodded in acknowledgement. "What about your family?" "Your letters mentioned parents in Maine," I asked, my hand still on the dough. "My father's a merchant, and my mother manages their social calendar. I have 2 younger sisters." She hesitated before adding, "They don't know I've come west to marry. They believe I've taken a teaching job in Chicago." Carrick's eyebrows raised. "You didn't tell them?" "They wouldn't have understood," I said, kneading more forcefully than necessary. "After the scandal, they mainly worried about how it affected their standing in society. My father even suggested I move to his cousins in Kennebec to wait out the gossip, as if one could hide for years until everyone forgot. And going west as a mail-order bride seemed like a better option. It offered a fresh start and independence, even if that independence comes through marriage," I added simply. A softness entered Carrick's expression. "Well, I'm glad you're here, even if your reasons weren't what I imagined." "What did you imagine, Mr. Carter?" I blurted before I could think. He leaned against the doorframe, pondering. "Honestly, I thought you might be fleeing poverty, seeking adventure, or just practical enough to see that a business arrangement between compatible people could grow into something meaningful. And now," he said quietly, "knowing what you know about me, I think you're braver than most men I've met. It takes courage to leave everything familiar behind, especially alone." The sincere compliment, offered without flattery, warmed something inside me. I looked away quickly, feeling flustered. "I should finish this bread," I murmured. "And I should show you around the ranch when you're ready," Carrick replied. "You see, a woman should know what she's potentially agreeing to." An hour later, we walked across the property together, Rusty bounding ahead through the tall grass. Carrick pointed out the land's boundaries, explained his plans for expansion, and pointed out the spring that supplied our water. "The creek never runs dry, even in drought years," he explained. "That's why this land's worth the risk," he added. "How long have you been here?" I asked, trying to match his long strides. 5 years, he replied. "Came west after the war with what savings I had. I worked on other ranches until I could afford this place." I gestured toward a half-constructed building near the barn. "The herds need more space for processing," I explained. I noticed how his face lit up when talking about his plans for the ranch. To him, it was more than just property, more like a vision coming to life. "It's impressive what you've built," I said sincerely. He looked at me, seeming to gauge my sincerity. "It's not what most women would want," he said softly. "Maybe I'm not most women," I responded. A smile appeared at the corner of his lips, the first genuine smile I'd seen from him, transforming his otherwise serious face and revealing a dimple in his right cheek. "No, Miss Harper, I don't believe you are," he said. We continued walking, falling into step beside each other. The vast landscape made me feel both small and strangely free. No structures hemming me in, no judging eyes from windows. "Call me Amelia," I suddenly said. "If we're considering marriage, Miss Harper seems too formal." Carrick nodded. "Amelia, then, and I'm Carrick," I said. At the corral, he introduced me to the horses, his own chestnut gelding named Buck, a dappled mare called Penny, and a gentle palomino. "This one's yours if you decide to stay," he said as the palomino nudged my shoulder. "Her name's Daisy." She's even-tempered. Good for someone who hasn't ridden much, he added. I stroked the horse's velvety nose. What makes you think I haven't ridden much? I asked, surprised. Carrick looked surprised. Have you? My grandfather owned a farm outside Maine, I said. I spent summers there as a child. I might not be a cowgirl, but I can stay on a horse. I smiled at the memory. Grandfather said I had a natural seat. For a moment, Carrick just stared at me, an unreadable flicker passing across his face. Then he let out a deep, warm laugh that I immediately wanted to hear again. Looks like I stand corrected, he said. Turns out, there's more to you than what meets the eye, Amelia Foster. I could say the same about you, Carrick Smith, I replied. Our eyes met, and an unexpected shift passed between us, a moment of genuine connection that surprised both of us. I cleared my throat and looked away first. We should head back, I said. Storms are brewing in the west. Sure enough, dark clouds gathered on the horizon. By the time I reached the house, the wind had picked up, carrying the scent of rain. I spent the afternoon indoors as the storm rolled over the land. Carrick showed me his account books, explaining the ranch's finances with impressive transparency. I admired his meticulous record-keeping and careful approach to expanding his operation without falling into debt. Most ranchers borrow heavily. One bad winter can ruin them, he said. I prefer to grow steadily, he added. That's wise, I agreed, though it must require a lot of patience. Something I've had to learn, he admitted. Not always my strong suit. Lightning flashed outside as Carrick built a fire in the hearth. The crackling flames and the pounding rain created a cozy atmosphere that eased the conversation. I found myself sharing stories from my teaching days, the children I had become attached to, and the satisfaction of seeing young minds grow. You miss it, Carrick observed. Teaching, I confirmed. But that chapter has closed, Carrick said thoughtfully. Perhaps not entirely. Ethelburg is expanding quickly, and there's talk of constructing a proper schoolhouse by next year. They'll need a teacher. Amelia looked at him sharply. You wouldn't mind if your wife worked outside the home, Carrick shrugged. The ranch certainly needs tending, but winters are long, and if teaching makes you happy, he left the thought unfinished. That evening, we cooked supper together, moving around the kitchen with increasing ease in each other's company. Over dinner, I described the ranch's seasonal routines, the spring plowing, summer grazing, fall roundup, and winter upkeep. It's never easy, he warned, but there's a certain satisfaction in it. I'm not afraid of hard work, Amelia assured him, though I must admit, I've never milked a cow. We have just one milk cow, Bessie, Carrick said playfully. She's as gentle as they come. I'll teach you tomorrow if you'd like. I would, Amelia said, realizing she truly meant it. That night, lying in bed as the rain tapped against the roof, Amelia reflected on how unexpectedly her life had changed. 2 days earlier, I'd been sobbing on a stagecoach, convinced I had made a terrible mistake. Now I was contemplating a future that, while uncertain, offered real possibility. Gunslinger Jedediah Smith was nothing like she had imagined from his letters. Rather than just a serious, practical rancher, he possessed depth she hadn't anticipated. Intelligence, thoughtfulness, and a quiet strength that put her at ease rather than intimidating her. Of course, it wasn't love. Such feelings couldn't develop in a single day, but it felt like a foundation. Perhaps something on which something genuine might be built. The next morning, after a fresh, clear dawn following the storm, I woke up early, determined to prepare breakfast before my husband began his ranch chores. To my surprise, he was already in the kitchen, coffee brewing on the stove. Good morning, I greeted, looking up from the letter I was writing. Sleep well? Very, thank you. She nodded toward my paper. Important correspondence for the general store. I thought we might ride into town today. If you're agreeable, you could meet some folks and pick up supplies. The idea of meeting the townspeople made Amelia a little nervous, but she understood it was necessary. Of course. What time were you thinking? After the morning chores. There's a dress shop I heard about from Martha Brennan. I thought you might want to look in and maybe order something for Sunday. Amelia glanced down at her practical brown dress, one of just 3 she brought, and realized none were suitable for a church wedding. That's considerate of you, she said. Carrick folded the list and tucked it into his pocket. I also thought we could discuss the wedding. Reverend Thompson will be here Sunday, if you've decided. He left the sentence hanging, his expression carefully neutral. Amelia took a deep breath. I'd like to move forward as planned, if you're still willing. Relief passed over Carrick's face, briefly replaced by a subtle smile. I am? Then Sunday it is, she said, surprised by her own certainty. After breakfast, I kept my promise to teach Amelia how to milk the dairy cow. We walked to the small barn together, where the calm brown cow greeted us with a soft moo. She's friendly, I said, patting her side. Just approach her calmly. He demonstrated the technique, guiding Amelia's hands as he showed her how to grasp and pull in a smooth rhythm. His calloused hands gently covered hers, and his voice was patient as he explained. The intimacy of the moment, his chest nearly pressed against her back, his breath warm near her ear, made Eliza painfully aware of him as a man, not just a potential husband. You're a natural, Carrick said approvingly as the milk flowed into the pail container. I had a good teacher, she replied, glancing over her shoulder to find his face closer than expected. Their eyes met, and Carrick lingered a moment longer in her gaze before stepping back. I'll saddle the horses, he said, his voice a little rough. We should get to Ethelberg before noon. The ride to Ethelberg took less than an hour. I appreciated the chance to demonstrate my riding skills, and Carrick seemed impressed with my comfort and ease handling Daisy. You didn't exaggerate your riding abilities, he remarked as we neared the town. I rarely exaggerate anything, I responded, though it's been years since I rode regularly. You'll have plenty of chances now, Carrick said. You can't run a ranch without riding. Ethelberg looked more inviting in daylight than it had when I arrived in tears. The main street displayed several new buildings alongside the original ones, indicating a town undergoing growth. People nodded greetings to me as they passed, curious eyes taking in Amelia. We tied our horses outside the general store, and I extended my arm as we entered. The shopkeeper, a balding man with spectacles, looked up from his ledger. Montgomery. Your bride has arrived, he said, then looked at me. Madam, welcome to Ethelberg. Thank you, Mr. Wilson, I replied. I introduced myself as Albert Wilson, extending my hand, which she shook. My wife has been eager to meet you. New faces are always welcome here, especially ladies. He glanced around and added, The town's got too many single men for comfort. Carrick handed him his list. We need these supplies, Al, and Miss Foster will be selecting some fabric and notions. Of course. We just expanded our fabric section, Wilson said, motioning toward the back of the store. I ordered some new patterns from back east. As I browsed the fabrics, I was approached by a cheerful, plump woman who introduced herself as Beatrice Wilson. So, your mail order bride is a pretty one? She said with a grin. My, he certainly found himself quite the beauty. Her straightforward comment was delivered kindly, with good humor, so Amelia took no offense. "We're all glad he's finally settling down," Beatrice added. "I'd been worried about him, all alone out west." "Have you known Mr. Carter long?" I asked out of genuine curiosity. "Since he first settled here," Beatrice said. "Lived a quiet life, dependable as sunrise. Built a great part of this town, never asked for payment. The ideal neighbor." She leaned in conspiratorially. Half the single women in town wanted him to court locally, but he sent east for a bride instead. I was surprised. Women were interested in him. Honey, a hard-working, honest man with land and good looks. It's no wonder they were lining up for a shot. Beatrice's chuckle was sympathetic, but she added, "He never really noticed. Too busy with his ranch." This made Amelia pause, considering that Carrick could have had many local women interested in him. Yet he'd chosen to advertise for a mail-order bride. Why? After choosing a lovely blue fabric for her wedding dress and arranging for the seamstress to fit her later that day, Claire rejoined Daniel at the front of the shop. "All set?" he asked. "Very." Wilson was very helpful. Carrick looked slightly uncomfortable. "I need to see the blacksmith about some repairs. Would you mind waiting with the seamstress for an hour?" "Not at all. I have plenty to do," Amelia assured him. They arranged to meet at a small cafe for lunch before parting ways. Madame Dubois, the sharp-eyed French seamstress, disapproved of her hurried measurements, but promised Amelia a simple, elegant wedding dress by Saturday. "For Mr. Montgomery, I make an exception," she said, pins in her mouth as she measured. "A good man. He deserves a beautiful bride." By the time I met Carrick at lunch, I had received similar compliments from half a dozen townspeople, all praising his work ethic, fairness, and helpful nature. I'm sorry, but the provided text appears to be an error message rather than a narrative paragraph. Could you please provide the actual story or narrative text you'd like me to review and polish? The service may be down or not responding to traffic from Cloudflared. The pride in his voice made Amelia's heart swell with joy. I told the mayor that I would be honored to help establish Ethelberg School. That evening, as we prepared supper together, I brought up the subject again. "Are you truly comfortable with me teaching? It might take time away from ranch work." Carrick glanced up from the potatoes he was peeling. "Amelia, you brighten up whenever you talk about teaching. I wouldn't want to take that away from you." He put down his knife. "Besides, you've already shown you can handle both household chores and ranch work efficiently. It's different from what I initially expected," she pointed out. "So are you," I replied with a small smile. "Actually, it's much better than I had imagined. The fall roundup kept both of us busy from sunrise to sunset. I surprised Carrick's temporary ranch hands with my readiness to cook for the crew and even ride out to deliver midday meals. By season's end, I had earned their respect, which was quite an achievement for a woman from the East. As the first snow began to dust the distant mountains, I was surprised to realize it had been nearly 4 months since I had stepped off that stagecoach in tears. The life she had built with Carrick already felt more stable, more real than anything she'd known in Maine. One night, sitting beside the fire with Carrick reading aloud from a new novel while I mended one of his shirts, I suddenly became aware of my own contentment. I set aside my sewing to watch his profile, his strong jawline, the slight furrow of concentration between his brows, and how the firelight lit up his hair. "Carrick," I whispered softly. He looked up from his book. "Yes, I love you." The words slipped from my lips unbidden, catching us both off guard. We hadn't spoken of love before. Our relationship had begun as a simple arrangement, and our feelings had developed naturally over time. Carrick slowly set the book down. "Amelia, he said, his voice rough with emotion. Are you certain? Absolutely. I moved to kneel beside his chair. I didn't expect to feel this way. I thought perhaps we'd develop fondness, respect, even friendship. But this, I pressed my hand over my heart, is love. I know it. Carrick reached for me, pulling me into his lap. His arms wrapped around me tightly and securely. I've been afraid to say it, he admitted softly against my hair, worried that speaking it aloud might break the spell. He tilted my face up to his. I love you, Clara Hayes. I've loved you for weeks, maybe since that first day you had the courage to tell me the truth. Our kiss sealed the declaration, more intense and passionate than any before. When we finally parted, I rested my head against his shoulder. I never thought I'd find this, I whispered. Not after everything that's happened. And I admitted, nor I, Carrick. After Margaret Ann and the war, I thought that part of me was gone. We sat together silently, the fire crackling in the hearth, snow beginning to fall outside. Two people who had expected a practical arrangement discovered something far more precious, a love born of honesty, respect, and the daily choice to build a life together. Winter settled over the ranch, bringing shorter days and long nights in the warmth of our home. I spent my days doing ranch work, preparing for the school's opening after the new year, and making our house cozier. I sewed new curtains, braided rugs for the cold wooden floors, and rearranged furniture to create a more harmonious space. Carrick watched my efforts with appreciation. You've made it a real home, he told me one evening. Better than I ever managed myself. It was already a home, I corrected him. I've just added a woman's touch. Christmas was approaching, bringing preparations for the town celebration. I helped organize a pageant for the children, teaching them carols and simple recitations. To my surprise, Marcus volunteered to build the stable for the nativity scene. I commented as he worked on the structure in the barn, I didn't know you were so religious. Not especially, he admitted, but my father always said a man should help contribute to his community however he can. He looked up from his work. Besides, I like seeing you with the children. You'll make a wonderful mother someday. The casual remark made my stomach flutter. We hadn't talked about children directly, but the natural outcome of our marriage made parenthood likely eventually. Would you want that? I asked carefully. Children of our own. Carrick set down his tools and thought seriously. Yes, he said, I would. A family to work for. To pass this land down to someday. He examined my face. What about you? I've always wanted children. Teaching has been rewarding, but I also dreamed of having a family of my own. Carrick moved closer and took my hands. Then we will have them, God willing. Not just to inherit the ranch, but to raise them with love. The Christmas service at Ethelberg's church was a joyful event. The building was packed with families from miles around. The children's pageant brought proud smiles to parents and grandparents alike. Afterward, everyone gathered in the new town hall for a feast. Carrick and I returned home late, pleasantly exhausted from the celebration. He handed me a small package wrapped in brown paper. Merry Christmas, he whispered shyly. Inside was a beautiful leather-bound journal with blank pages waiting to be written in. For your thoughts, Carrick explained. I remembered how you once told me you used to keep a journal in Maine. I was touched by your thoughtfulness and retrieved my gift for you, a hand-knit scarf in deep blue wool, carved secretly during long evenings. It's perfect, he declared immediately, wrapping it around his neck even though the room was warm. Later, as we lay in the darkness, I whispered, This has been the happiest Christmas of my life. Carrick's arms tightened around me. Mine, too, I murmured. And it's just the beginning of many. In January, Etherberg School officially opened in a converted storefront while the new building was being constructed. I taught 15 students aged from 6 to 16, 3 days each week. The work was demanding but deeply rewarding, and every evening I returned to the ranch with stories about my students' progress and amusing questions. Carrick listened attentively, proud of my progress. When the weather was particularly harsh, he would ride into town to escort me home, unwilling to let me travel alone through snow or sleet. "You're too protective," I chided one gusty afternoon as we rode side by side. "Just cautious," he corrected me. Why winters don't forgive careless mistakes. February brought a fierce blizzard that isolated the ranch for nearly a week. We stayed close to the house, venturing outside only for essential chores, tying ropes between buildings to prevent getting lost in the whiteout. During those snow-covered days, we grew even closer, sharing stories we'd never told before. Carrick's war experiences that changed him deeply, my complicated relationship with my status-conscious parents. "Do you miss Maine at all?" One night, as we lay before the fire, with the wind howling outside, Carrick asked me something. I paused for a moment, contemplating. I miss certain things. The quiet libraries, the lively concerts, a few of my former students, but not the life I once had. I traced patterns on his chest with my finger. This feels more real, somehow more meaningful. "Even when you're snowed in with only me," he teased. "Especially then," I replied, pressing my lips to his in a gentle kiss. As winter transitioned into spring, the ranch came alive with renewed activity. Calving season meant long days and sometimes nights for both of us, with my wife quickly mastering the art of assisting with difficult births. Her composed skill impressed even the most seasoned ranch hands who returned for the season. "Mrs. Harper's got a real talent," Hank, the oldest crew member, told Carrick admiringly. "She saved that breech calf that would have been lost for sure." Carrick's chest swelled with pride. "She's exceptional," he agreed, watching as Amelia skillfully bottle-fed an orphaned calf. In May, just as the last snow patches melted from the north-facing slopes, I confirmed my suspicions from several weeks before. I was expecting our first child. She shared the news with her friend one evening as they strolled the land, inspecting the fresh spring grass growth. "Carrick," she said, stopping beside the creek that wound through their property, "I have something important to tell you." I turned to her, worry immediately shadowing my face. "Is something wrong?" I asked. "No," she reassured me, placing my hand gently on her still flat stomach. "Something's very right. We're going to have a baby." Carrick's expression shifted from concern to awe. "A baby? Are you sure?" Amelia nodded, her eyes shining with happiness. "Martha Evans confirmed it yesterday. The baby should arrive in late November." For a moment, Carrick seemed speechless. Then, to Amelia's surprise, he gently lifted her and spun her around, his laughter echoing through the open land. "Be careful," she protested, laughing along with him. "I'm in a delicate condition." He set her down swiftly, steadying her with firm hands. "Sorry. He shook his head, overcome. "Amelia, I never thought I could be this happy." News of our anticipated child spread quickly through the community, bringing congratulations and practical gifts from neighbors. I promised to knit blankets, while my friend Beatrice started planning a gathering to celebrate the upcoming arrival. As my body grew with the baby, I became increasingly protective, insisting I cut back my teaching to 2 days a week and hiring extra help on the ranch to ease my burden. "I'm pregnant, not fragile," she often reminded him, though she appreciated his concern. "Just humor me," he replied, pressing a kiss to her forehead. "It's my first time being a father." Summer passed swiftly with the ranch thriving, producing its biggest calf crop yet. The school term ended, giving Amelia time to prepare the house for her baby's arrival. I built a cradle from carefully chosen wood, working on it in the evenings while my wife sewed tiny clothes. As her due date approached, I sometimes reminisced about my arrival in Ethelberg, the tearful woman who stepped down from the coach less than a year earlier. How vastly my life had changed. How much richer, more meaningful it had become. One evening in early November, sitting on the porch watching the sunset, I took my companion's hand. "Do you remember what you said to me that first day?" I asked softly. "When I was crying at the station," he replied thoughtfully. "That you didn't have to pretend with me?" "Yes," she nodded. "I think that was the moment everything shifted for me." No one had ever given me permission to simply be myself. Not my parents, nor my employers, nor my friends in Maine. "I just wanted you to be comfortable," Carrick said quietly. "It seemed wrong to expect happiness when you clearly felt distressed." "It was more than that," Amelia insisted. "It was acceptance. You gave me that before you knew anything about me." Carrick brought her hand to his lips. "One of the best decisions I ever made," he said softly. Their son was born on a clear November morning after a long night that tested both my endurance and my patience. Martha Brennan, experienced as ever, guided the baby into this world safely. She announced it as a strong, healthy boy, placing him on Amelia's chest. "Lungs like a loud one," Martha said with a smile. Carrick, who hadn't left her side through the labor, gazed in awe at his son. "He's perfect," he whispered, emotion thickening his voice. "We named him James, after Carrick's father." As Amelia regained her strength, Carrick proved to be an attentive father, willing to walk the floor with the fussing baby or change diapers without hesitation. "You're a natural," Amelia observed one evening, as he gently rocked their son to sleep. "No, I'm not," I replied with a soft smile. "I'm just scared I'll do something wrong. But he's ours, and that's enough to make it worth figuring out." By our first wedding anniversary in December, life had settled into a new routine. James was growing quickly, delighting everyone with his first smiles and gurgles. The ranch had its best year yet, allowing Carrick to purchase more land and expand their herd. Amelia had resumed teaching once a week, bringing James along. The children adored the baby, and the school board discussed constructing an official teacher's residence next to the new schoolhouse. To celebrate, Martha and Joseph Reynolds offered to watch James for the evening, giving Amelia and Carrick a rare night alone. I prepared a special dinner, serving it under candlelight in my dining room. "Think," I said, smiling as we sipped a rare bottle of wine. "A year ago today, I was terrified of what my life would become." "And now?" Carrick asked softly, watching me. "I can't imagine any life but this." She lifted her glass. "To us," I said with affection. "To the family and the life we're building." "To us," she echoed, her eyes shining with love. As we sat before the fire later, I snuggled against Carrick's chest, his arms wrapped securely around me. Outside, the first snow of winter began to fall, cloaking the land in white. Inside, the warmth of their love and home created a sanctuary against the cold. "Have you ever wondered," I quietly asked, "how different things might have been if I hadn't been crying that day?" I considered this. "I might have kept up the pretense longer," I admitted. I might have tried to be what I thought you wanted rather than who I truly was, he said softly. I'm glad you didn't. I might never have shared my own truths if you hadn't revealed yours. Smiling, Amelia said, then I suppose we should be grateful for my tears. They led us here. Carrick kissed her tenderly. No more pretending, I promised myself. Just this real, true moment. Just this, I whispered back, leaning into his kiss. Outside, the snow kept falling silently, blanketing the ranch in icy stillness. Inside, the fire's glow flickered across the walls of their home, a place built on honesty, strengthened by love and full of hope for many more years. The mail-order bride who had arrived in tears and the cowboy who had responded with understanding rather than judgment had uncovered something unexpected. Not just a partnership of practicality, but a love story written in truth, still unfolding across the rugged Montana frontier.